If you ever play this game, take it slow. Don't try to run through it like I did since it led to so many deaths. Deadlight's a 2012 game developed by Tequila Works and published by Microsoft Studios. The story is simple. There's a shadow outbreak. You play as Randall, who gets separated from his friends Ben, Sam, and Stella, so they all decide to meet each other at a military shelter that they heard about in the radio. Since it's a safe point, he also expects to reunite with his lost wife and daughter there. I absolutely love the graphics and sound design. Cutscenes are drawn like a comic, giving them a lot of style. It kind of reminded me of Peace Walker, minus the speech bubbles and lengthy dialogue. The music didn't stand out too much for me, but it did the job with building up suspense and eeriness. Cloudy skies, wind, rain, dilapidated buildings and environments combined with the majority of the color palette consisting of blues, reds, and grays really gave the game that distinct look and somber tone. I couldn't attach myself to the characters since you only see them in the introduction and in key points of the game. Key points being scenes where they're usually in trouble, and possibly dying. Early on in the story, Randall finds Sam bleeding out and is pretty insensitive about it.
Where are the others?
The whole world is dying.
Where have they taken them?
I'm dying, Wayne.
You were going to die anyway.
Though I'm sure this wasn't intentional. The voice acting in Deadlight can get inconsistent in certain scenes, and sometimes the dialogue doesn't even match with whatever's happening.
It seems I'm not alone.
There was also a guy named Rat who saved and dragged Randall into the sewers. His level was so frustrating, but I'll get back to that later. Anyway, Randall looks for Rat's missing son and finds him on some rooftop. This boy was kind of annoying. He spent the entire segment outrunning Randall when they were getting chased by a helicopter, yet he has the nerve to complain when he gets cornered by shadows?
Where have you been? Help me!
I don't understand his logic. Later on, Ben is seen tied up and left to die with a shadow. Randall rescues him and searches a conveniently placed hospital for first aid to treat Ben's cut. Giving him medication, Ben assures that he's better. He ends up flying Randall in a helicopter but dies anyway and crashes the thing. Then Stella is rescued from being assaulted by some bored soldiers. Even though she was only in the final portion of the game, she was way worse than Resident Evil 4's Ashley. She managed to lift herself up early on and outrun the shadows, but for some reason, she whines and refuses to do anything by herself in every other scene.
I need help! Ah! Help me, Randall! Randall! A soldier is coming! Randall! A soldier is coming! I need help! There are too many shadows, Randall! Too many shadows! I will never make it!
Hell, I even abandoned her at one point just to see what happens.
Stella's been killed.
Thank God. I only empathized with Randall since he's an interesting guy, and, well, being the protagonist, he had the most screen time. He's a strong and brave character who makes all the tough decisions for everyone else, even at the cost of his own well-being. There might have been more backstory on all characters in Randall's journal, but I'd rather just read that online since notes and other collectibles are so risky to grab. Obtaining a simple journal page needs you to take many risks, like getting surrounded by a horde. Another problem is the time it takes Randall to pick things up. You can't cancel his animation, so there's a chance that you'll end up being attacked by a shadow when you decide to stop and grab something. It might be appealing to achievement hunters and players who generally like to 100% a title or gather more story. But I'm personally not that interested in doing all that unless I absolutely love the game. Along with the characters, the story was okay. The last half of the game, though. I had a feeling that his wife and daughter were dead, but I never thought that they died before the game's story even began, and at the hands of Randall himself. That was a pretty good twist along with the open ending of the game with him coming to terms with what he had done. Now the gameplay. It's simple, really. You run, jump, and climb. Push boxes here and there to solve puzzles and open locked doors with your axe, or shoot padlocks off with your gun. At first, I thought I just sucked at playing. I probably did, but the controls were clunky and it became even more obvious as I progressed through the game. Don't get me wrong, Randall's animations were superb. As I mentioned before, there's no way to cancel his animation, and that includes his movement. There was always some sort of delay where I had to wait for his animation to finish just so I could do another action. I bumped through a lot of walls during my playthrough, and I can't count how many times I've tackled a zombie by accident, all because I couldn't stop sprinting. Another issue I got was the actual platforming. There were times where I couldn't tell whether a climbable object was part of the background or the foreground. It would have been more enjoyable if the actual platforms could be distinguished between the environment. I feel like every time I tried to swing my axe at shadows, I had to position myself in a certain way just to hit them. Otherwise, I end up pushing them away or even missing despite the enemy being at point blank, which was a bit ridiculous. The easiest way to kill shadows was to use the revolver or shotgun. Go figure, huh? I did appreciate the fact that you didn't need to kill everything, as you could whistle and lure shadows away or make them fall into traps. The whistling mechanic doesn't really work well though, since sometimes shadows can somehow sense you, even if they don't see or hear you. Maybe they can sense your presence? I honestly don't know. The positioning problem isn't just limited to combat, it also happens a lot with climbing and platforming in general. Even if I was just a few pixels away from a ledge, the game just wouldn't let me jump up and grab it unless I was at the exact position. It was frustrating. I mean, I got swarmed so many times because of that. All of those issues were present during Rat's sewer level. His home had so many booby traps, and it really accentuated the trial and error nature of Deadlight. I'm just glad that there are plenty of checkpoints, so you never really have to worry about losing a ton of progress from dying. I encountered 2 glitches that were pretty interesting. They weren't game-breaking, but quite funny, actually. Rat confiscated Randall's weapons when he first got to the sewer, so he only managed to get a slingshot. I'm not sure if I missed some room or box that contained Randall's old weapons, but I decided to go on with just my slingshot, even when Rat encouraged me to go back and get my weapons. I had to push this big crate in order to reach the exit. Problem is, I couldn't push the darn thing when shadows were next to it. Determined as I was to continue on without my trusty axe and guns, I kept crouching and firing my slingshot, hoping I could push the box little by little every time they got distracted. Eventually, one of the shadows walked out of the freaking stage and fell into oblivion. I swear I wasn't trying to break the game. The second glitch occurred later on. Randall tries to escape this collapsing underground building. Just when I reached the top, I too fell into oblivion. I don't understand how. Randall wasn't too happy about it either. Deadlight wasn't a masterpiece, but it was decent. I complained about its flaws quite a lot, but it was a fairly enjoyable experience. I'm not a big fan of platformers in general, but this one was pretty decent, so it's worth checking out during a sale. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought about the game in the video below in the comments. Feel free to follow me on Twitter if you want updates, and maybe even random tweets from me, because why not?